Hello everyone and welcome back to our little tutorial series. Now I would like to show you how to add a node to your workspace. If you haven't seen the video before, I would highly recommend to watch it to get a little better idea of what we will do right now, because in the previous video I explained a little bit of the concept of the Weave Manager and how everything is structured. If you have watched the video before, then it will be easy for you to follow. So let's get right into it. So we have created the first workspace in the previous video, in which we will go into right now. And now what we want to do, we want to add this little Raspberry Pi as a node to this workspace, because we have no node right here, right now. So, but what is a node? A node is basically the edge computing unit which is attached to the Weave Manager, on which you can deploy edge applications to. These nodes are hardware devices, which are basically data aggregation computing units which are running Linux and Docker. This is the minimum requirements, because we need Linux distribution and Docker in order to install our edge software, which is called the Weave agent. The Weave agent needs to be installed in order to understand the edge applications and to basically execute them. And this is what we're going to do now. To give you some examples, a node can be, of course, a Raspberry Pi, but it can be an industrial smart gateway like a Coonbus Raspberry Pi 3, or it can be on a type of data aggregation hardware from a little server on the side, from your local machine, from an EC2 virtual instance to any smart gateway. You basically gets data input and can send data out and has the requirements fulfilled, which you will find in our documentation page. So if you go to the documentation page and the little section called hardware validation, there is a tab which is called system requirements, and you can follow the system requirements, which describes exactly what the minimum requirements are in order to install the Weave agent and execute some sort of edge application. So, but let's do it right now. We are now in our workspace and we click on register node. Now you will come to a form which asks you for certain information about this node, like what would you like to name it? My first node. It's a Raspberry Pi, as I already mentioned. It's into our organization, and we want to install it into our first workspace. So we can add a little description to it, my first node for the video in this case, and we can submit it. What you will find now is the option to download the configuration file, which is the file which you then need to transfer to the Raspberry Pi in our case, in order to tell the installer what to do. And you will find a link to the documentation for the step-by-step how to install the Weave agent onto your hardware. If we go back now, first let's download this configuration file. Awesome. Now it's on our desktop. Perfect. And if we go back to the overview about the nodes, and you see that we now created the first node, which has the status created, which means it's already on the platform, but it's not yet connected, because of course we didn't connect anything yet. And we come to it now. So what we have as a setup right now, right here, is a little terminal on the left where we SSH'd into our little Raspberry Pi here. It's called the Weave Pi number 3. And we also have opened the terminal for our Mac, because what we need to do first is to transfer this little file to the Weave Pi 3. Of course, there are many ways, but what we will use now is the SCP command. So what you need to do is to put the SCP, then the path to the configuration file, and then the user, and add to Weave Pi to the either the IP address or the name of the local device into your network. Add enter, and then we put in the password, and the file is transferred. So if we go back to the Pi and we put in ls, we will see nice, the agent config JSON is right there. So the next thing you would need to do is go back to the documentation. And where we have a little one-liner here, which you can just copy and go back right in. And in the very end, we need to put in the path. And since we have since we copied the file directly on the Pi, we can just put in agent config JSON. And now if we hit enter, the installer runs, it recognizes the architecture of the hardware you have there, it uses the configuration file to know where to register the node to, and it just runs through. It takes a little time. Now you see it's on connected, registered true. And if you go back to our platform and look at the list and click refresh, then we see the status is connected. It means that you successfully now connected this little Raspberry Pi onto the platform, and the next thing you can do is to create an Edge application and deploy it right onto it. But we will do this in the next video. If you haven't signed up yet to our community or to our beta, you will find both links below in the video descriptions. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them as well, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next video.